Okay. Um, this just in. I'm Justin, and I'll be your Sunday on Taxi Cab Collab. It's Bird with a Y. For my topic, I'm going to tell scary stories, put pictures, creepy music, and yeah, I'm just gonna read my favorite ones. They're called creepypastas. They're fictional or non-fictional. You never know. They're fictional stories from basically a fan fiction site. A lot of fun, a lot of entertaining ones, and I'm going to read my favorite. Most of the ones I like are pretty short, so I'll try to read a bunch of them. And I'm going to put pictures. Creepy music. I think I already said that. I'm going to say it again. Pictures and creepy music. And I hope you enjoy it. You won't be seeing me anymore. I don't have to record very much for this one. Sort of happy about that. No offense. I love you guys, and I love this. It's just sort of strange. I have Sunday. I have Sunday. And Sunday is the day I do all the stuff that I didn't do the past 5 days. 6 days. So, I don't know. I'm gonna try starting these a little bit earlier in the week so I can put more time into them. Because they're really entertaining to do, actually. They're a lot of fun. I just have to sit here and talk to myself alone for hours sometimes. Okay, we're gonna read the first story. I'd had them ever since I was a kid. I can remember being incredibly self-conscious about them, hiding them in my pockets, under books and bags. The kids at school never said anything to my face, but I knew they were laughing behind my back. I remember asking my parents to take me to the doctor to get them checked out. The growths on my hands seemed to be the elephant in the room back then, since they'd just say I was fine and change the subject, but I knew better. I had tried to remove them as a child, but without avail. Scissors, knives, potato peelers, trying to cut or scrape them off was always a lost cause because I couldn't continue once the pain kicked in. But today was different. It's amazing how numb you can get with a couple shots from a bottle of Jack Daniels. I was originally planning to use a sharp knife, but figured that trying to slice through the tough flesh of the growths would be too arduous in my drunken state. I opted for a slightly more technological plan B. I had to hurry, though. I was already pretty lightheaded, and I was starting to feel dizzy. My hands and forearms nearly blue from lack of circulation. Couldn't wait much longer, either. The whirring of the blender helped to put me in a sort of trance, ready to do what I had wanted to do since I first looked down at my strange deformities. I shoved my left hand in first. The immediate sensation of sharp blades slicing through flesh was jarring, but I was surprised at how well the alcohol was working. I expected it to hurt more. I could hear the sharp metal churning and cutting, working perfectly as I had planned. I pressed my hand down harder. All those bad memories, all the embarrassment, all those horrible things were now nothing more than a thick, red pulp. Breaking from the feelings of ecstasy, I pulled out before the blades hit knuckle. I smiled, taking a good look at my new hand. As for the growths, well, 5 down and 5 to go. A man went to a hotel and walked up to the front desk to check in. The woman at the desk gave him his key and told him that on the way to his room, there was a door with no number that was locked and no one was allowed in there. Especially no one should look inside the room, under any circumstances. So he followed the instructions of the woman at the front desk, going straight to his room and going to bed. The next night, his curiosity would not leave him alone about the room with no number on the door. He walked down the hall to the door and tried the handle. Sure enough, it was locked. He bent down and looked through the wide keyhole. Cold air passed through it, chilling his eye. What he saw was a hotel room like his, and in the corner was a woman whose skin was completely white. She was leaning her head against the wall, facing away from the door. He stared in confusion for a while. He almost knocked on the door out of curiosity, but decided not to. This distillation saved his life. He crept away from the door and walked back to his room. The next day he returned to the door and looked through the wide keyhole. This time, all he saw was redness. He couldn't make anything out besides the distinct color red, unmoving. Perhaps the inhabitants of the room knew he was spying the night before, and had blocked the keyhole with something red. At this point, he decided to consult the woman at the front desk for more information. She sighed and said, "Did you look through the keyhole?" The man told her that he had, and she said, "Well, I might as well tell you the story then. A long time ago, a man murdered his wife in that room, and her ghost haunts it. But these people were not ordinary. They were white all over, except for their eyes, which were red. You get a phone call from your mother. Since her car has been in the shop, she asks you to go to the grocery store and pick up a few odds and ends for her. Bread, milk, cereal, chicken breasts. Just the basic kind of dinner stuff. After writing down a small list, you reluctantly get in the car and pick up the items at the store. The lady cashier makes an odd remark to you. She says, "You know, we're in no danger of a milk shortage." Upon arriving at her house, you knock several times, no answer. You decide to try the door, and it opens. You place the grocery bag on the counter. Strange, there seems to be 6 other grocery bags, each with identical contents. In a couple, the chicken and milk has gone bad. "Mom?" you call out, but no answer. You make your way through the kitchen and into the living room. Sitting on the couch, with her head cut off, and neatly resting on her lap, is your mother. Naturally, you call the police, who come over to investigate. They mention that she's been dead for nearly a week. Furthermore, the police psychiatrist is at the scene and talks to you after you give your initial statement. Sitting on the front steps, you overhear the psychiatrist talking with the crime scene investigator. "It's not uncommon for people suffering from schizophrenia to get locked into a series of repetitive behaviors," he says. You think to yourself, they can't be talking about me. Schizophrenia? No way. Repetitive behavior? Do they think I did this? Suddenly your cell phone goes off. "Hello?" "Hi, hon, it's me. Could you stop by the store and pick up some chicken and milk? Oh, and I need some bread and cereal, too." "No problem, Mom. I'll be right over." In 1983, a team of scientists conducted a radical experiment in an undisclosed facility. The scientists had theorized that a human without access to any senses or ways to perceive stimuli would be able to perceive the presence of God. They believed that the 5 senses clouded our awareness of eternity, and without them, a human could actually establish contact with God by thought. An elderly man who had claimed to have nothing left to live for was the only test subject to volunteer. To purge him of all his senses, the scientists performed a complex operation in which every sensory nerve connection to the brain was surgically severed. Although the test subject retained full muscular function, he could not see, hear, taste, smell, or feel. With no possible way to communicate with or even sense the outside world, he was alone with his thoughts. Scientists monitored him as he spoke aloud in his state of mind in jumbled, slurred sentences that he couldn't even hear. After 4 days, the man claimed to be hearing hushed, unintelligible voices in his head. Assuming it was an onset of psychosis, the scientists paid little attention to the man's concern. 2 days later, the man cried that he could hear his dead wife speaking with him, and even more, he could communicate back. The scientists were intrigued, but not convinced until the subject started naming dead relatives of the scientists. He repeated personal information of the scientists that only their dead spouses and parents would have known. At this point, a sizable portion of scientists left the study. After a week of conversing with the deceased through his thoughts, the subject became distressed, saying the voices were overwhelming. In every waking moment, his consciousness was bombarded by hundreds of voices that refused to leave him alone. He frequently threw himself against the wall, trying to elicit a pain response. He begged the scientist for sedatives so he could escape the voices by sleeping. This tactic worked for 3 days, until he started having severe night terrors. The subject repeatedly said that he could see and hear the deceased in his dreams. Only a day later, the subject began to scream and claw at his non-functional eyes, hoping to sense something in the physical world. The hysterical subject now said the voices of the dead were deafening and hostile, speaking of hell and the end of the world. At one point he yelled, "No heaven, no forgiveness," for 5 straight hours. He continually begged to be killed, but the scientists were convinced that he was close to establishing contact with God. After another day, the subject could no longer form coherent sentences. Seemingly mad, he started to bite off chunks of flesh from his arm. The scientists rushed into the test chamber and restrained him to a table so that he could not kill himself. After a few hours of being tied down, the subject halted his struggling and screaming. He stared blankly at the ceiling as teardrops silently streaked across his face. For 2 weeks, the subject had to manually rehydrate due to the constant crying. Eventually, he turned his head and, despite his blindness, made focused eye contact with the scientist for the first time in the study. He whispered, "I have spoken with God, and he has abandoned us," and his vital signs stopped. There was no apparent cause of death. Those stories, pretty scary. I'm pretty sure that that is the scariest thing I've ever heard in my life. Pretty sure. Pretty sure. It's pretty scary. Pretty scary. There's something in your house, and it's gonna get you. But not till tomorrow, so bye guys.